Lady Chatterley's Lover, with me, Morel Bernard. So, the last word I believe I said was, so that's that. And when one died, the last word to life would be, so that's that. Money, perhaps one couldn't say the same there. Money, one always wanted. Money, success, the bitch goddess, as Tommy Dukes persisted in calling it. After Henry James, that was a permanent necessity. You couldn't spend your last sal and say finally, so that's that. No. If you lived even another 10 minutes, you wanted a few more sals for something or other, just to keep the business mechanically growing. You need money. You had to have it. Money you have to have. You need it. Really have anything else, so that's that. Since, of course, it's not your own fault you are alive. Once you are alive, money is a necessity, and the only absolute necessity. All the rest you can get along without at a pinch, but not money. Emphatically, that's that. She thought of Michaelis and the money she might have had with him, and even that she didn't want. She preferred the lesser amount which she helped Clifford to make by his writing, than she actually helped to make. Clifford and I together, we make 1,200 a year out of writing. So she put it to herself. Make money. Make it. Out of nowhere. Wiring out of thin air. The last feat to be humanly proud of. The rest, all my I Betty Martin. So she plodded home to Clifford to join forces with him again, to make another story out of nothingness, and a story meant money. Clifford seemed to care very much whether his stories were considered first-class literature or not. Strictly, she didn't care. Nothing in it, said her father. £1,200 last year was the retort, simple and final. If you were young, you just set your teeth and bit on and held on till the money began to flow from the invisible. It was a question of power. It was a question of will, a subtle, powerful emanation of will out of yourself brought back to you, the mysterious nothingness of money, a word on a bit of paper. It was a sort of magic, certainly. It was triumph. The bitch goddess. Well, if one had to prostitute oneself, let it be to a bitch goddess. One could always despise her, even while one prostituted oneself to her, which was good. Clifford, of course, had still many childish taboos and fetishes. He wanted to be thought really good, which was all cock-a-hoopy nonsense. What was really good was what actually caught on. It was no good being really good and getting left with it. It seemed as if most of the really good men just missed the bus. After all, you only lived life. And if you missed the bus, you were just left on the pavement along with the rest of the failures. Connie was contemplating a winter in London with Clifford next winter. He and she had caught the bus all right, so they might as well ride on top for a bit and show it. The worst of it was Clifford tended to become vague, absent, and to fall into fits of vacant depression. It was the wound to his psyche coming out. But it made Connie want to scream. Oh God, if the mechanism of the consciousness itself was going to go wrong, then what was one to do? Hang it all. One did one bit. Was one to be let down absolutely? Sometimes she wept bitterly. But even as she wept, she was saying to herself, silly fool, wetting hankies, as if that would get you anywhere. Since Michael's, she had made up her mind she wanted nothing. That seemed the simplest solution of the otherwise insoluble. She wanted nothing more than what she'd got. Only she wanted to get ahead with what she'd got. Clifford, the stories, Ragby, the Lady Chatterley business, money and fame, such as it was. She wanted to go ahead with it all. Love, sex, all that sort of stuff. Just water ices. Lick it up and forget it. And if you don't hang on to it in your mind, it's nothing. Sex, especially, nothing. Make up your mind to it and you've solved the problem. Sex and a cocktail. They both lasted about as long, had the same effect, and amounted to about the same thing. But a child, a baby, that was still one of the sensations. She would venture very gingerly on that experiment. There was a man to consider, and it was curious, there wasn't a man in the world whose children she wanted. Mixed children? Oh, repulsive thought. As life had a child to a rabbit. Tommy Jukes? He was very nice, but somehow you couldn't associate him with a baby, another generation. He ended it himself. And out of all the rest of Clifford's pretty wide acquaintance, there was not a man who did not rouse her contempt when she thought of having a child by him. There were several who would have been quite possible as lover, even Mick. But to let them breed a child on you, humiliation and abomination. So that was that. Nevertheless, Connie had the child at the back of her mind. Wait. She would sift the generations of men through their sieve and see if she couldn't find one who would do. Go ye into the streets and byways of Jerusalem and see if you can find a man. It had been impossible to find a man in the Jerusalem of the prophet, though there were thousands of male humans. But a man. Oh. She had an idea that he would have to be a foreigner, not an Englishman, still less an Irishman. A real foreigner. But wait. Next winter, she would get Clifford to London. The following winter, she would get him abroad to the south of France, Italy. Wait. She was in no hurry about the child. That was her own private affair, and the one point on which, in her own queer female way, she was serious to the bottom of her soul. She was not going to risk any chance comer, not she. One might take a lover almost at any moment, but a man who should beget a child on you, wait. It's a very different matter. Go ye into the streets and byways of Jerusalem. It was not a question of love. It was a question of a man. Why, one might even rather hate him personally, yet if he was the man, what would one's personal hate matter? I mean, this business concerned another part of oneself. It had rained as usual, and the parts were too sodden for Clifford's chair. But Connie would go out. She went out alone every day now, mostly in the wood, where she was really alone. She saw nobody there. This day, however, Clifford wanted to send a message to the keeper. And as the boy was laid up with influenza, somebody always seemed to have influenza at Rugby, Connie said she would call at the cottage. The air was soft and dead, as if all the world was slowly dying, grey and clammy and silent, even from the shuffling of the colliers, for the pits were working short time, and today they were stopped altogether, to end of all things. In the wood, all was utterly inert and motionless. Only great drops fell from the bare boughs with a hollow little crash. For the rest, among the old trees was depth within depth of grey, hopeless inertia, silence, nothingness. Connie walked timidly on. From the old wood came an ancient melancholy, somehow soothing to her. Better than the harsh incestians of the outer world, she liked the inwardness of the remnant of forest, the unspeaking reticence of the old trees. They seemed a very power of silence, and yet a vital presence. They too were waiting, obstinately, stockily waiting, and giving off a potency of silence. Perhaps they were only waiting for the end to be cut down, cleared away, the end of the forest. For them, the end of all things. But perhaps their strong and aristocratic silence, the silence of strong trees, meant something else. As she came out of the wood on the north side, the keeper's cottage, a rather dark brown stone cottage with gables and a handsome chimney, looked uninhabited. It was so silent and alone. But a thread of smoke rose from the chimney, and the little railed-in garden in the front of the house was dark and kept very tidy. The door was shut. Now she was here, she felt a little shy of the man with his curious, far-seeing eyes. She did not like bringing him more orders, and felt like going away again. She knocked softly. No one came. She knocked again, but still not loudly. There was no answer. She peeped through the window and saw the dark little room with its almost sinister privacy, not wanting to be invaded. She stood and listened. And it seemed to her she heard sounds from the back of the cottage. Having failed to make herself heard, her mettle was roused. She would not be defeated. So she went round the side of the house. At the back of the cottage, the land rose steeply, so the backyard was sunken and enclosed by a low stone wall. She turned the corner of the house and stopped. In the little yard, 2 paces beyond her, the man was washing himself, utterly unaware. He was naked to the hips, his velveteen breeches slipping down over his slender loins, and his white, slim back was curved over a big bowl of soapy water in which he ducked his head, shaking his head with a queer, quick little motion, lifting his slender white arms and pressing the soapy water from his ears, quick, subtle as a weasel playing with water, and utterly alone. Connie backed away round the corner of the house and hurried away to the wood. In spite of herself, she had had a shock. After all, merely a man washing himself, commonplace enough, heaven knows. Yet, in some curious way, it was a visionary experience. It had hit her in the middle of the body. She saw the clumsy breeches slipping down over the pure, delicate white loins, the bones showing a little, and the sense of aloneness of a creature purely alone overwhelmed her. Perfect, white, solitary nudity of a creature that lives alone and inwardly alone. And beyond that, a certain beauty of a pure creature, not the stuff of beauty, not even the body of beauty, but a lambience, the warm, white flame of a single life, revealing itself in contours that one might touch a body. Connie had received the shock of vision in her womb, and she knew it. It lay inside her. But with her mind, she was inclined to ridicule. A man washing himself in a backyard, no doubt with evil-smelling yellow soap. She was rather annoyed. Why should she be made to stumble on these vulgar privacies? So she walked away from herself. But after a while she sat down on a stump. She was too confused to think. But in the coil of her confusion, she was determined to deliver her message to the fellow. She would not be balked. She must give him time to dress himself, but not time to go out. He was probably preparing to go out somewhere. So she sauntered slowly back, listening. As she came near, the cottage looked just the same. A dog barked, and she knocked at the door, her heart beating in spite of herself. Lady Chatterley's lover is continuing. Do listen to the next episode to find out what happened. Listen to the next episode of Lady Chatterley's lover. You have been listening to Morel. So, see you in the next video.